If Machiavelli ever sought a model for his prince, perhaps he found it here, in a kingdom by the Atlantic, where a king ruled without raising his voice. He neither boasted nor trembled. Dom John II did not govern with pomp, but with method and time. While others fought for titles, he drew maps. While they conspired, he already knew their names. And when the world began to move, he had already arrived. They called him the perfect prince. But he was more than that. He was the architect of silence, the engineer of empire, the last medieval king, and the first modern ruler. Today we give him a voice, because history has not forgotten. Portugal sailed forward, guided by the compass he left behind. Dom John II was born on May 3, 1455 in Lisbon. He was the son of King Afonso V and Queen Isabel of Coimbra. He was the grandson of King Duarte and great-grandson of Henry the Navigator. He carried the blood of explorers and the weight of legacy. He grew up among maps, swords, and silence. While Afonso dreamed of crusades, Dom John dreamed of routes written in stars. He studied astronomy, geography, mathematics, history, and languages. He learned to read the sky, the winds, and the world. Never drawn to courtly vanity, he watched, calculated, and thought like a king. In 1471, at 16, he joined his father in the campaign to Arzila in North Africa and was knighted on the battlefield. In 1474, his father named him governor of the overseas territories. He was 19, already drafting maps, training pilots, and planning the future. In 1476, during the Castilian succession crisis, he led a flank at the Battle of Toro. While his father's line broke, he held firm. The battle ended in military stalemate, but Portugal lost political ground. Yet in the chaos of that day, a leader revealed himself. In 1477, with his father away in France, chasing a failed alliance with Louis XI, Dom John II assumed the regency of Portugal. He found a country weakened. The finances were in ruin. The court fragmented. But where others saw collapse, he saw opportunity. In practice, he now held the reins of the roots and of the future. From the shadows of the throne, he began reshaping Portugal in his own image. He read maps. He studied captains' reports. He watched the silence of both allies and enemies. He knew royal power was fragile. He knew the nobility sought more than they deserved. And he knew the future wouldn't be won in courts, but at sea. At just 24 in 1479, he led the negotiations for the Treaty of Alcasovas. Portugal recognized Isabella as Queen of Castile and renounced claims to the throne. But in return, Castile recognized Portugal's supremacy in the South Atlantic. Guinea, Cape Verde, Madeira, the Azores, and the ocean routes beyond. The Canary Islands remained with Castile. But the treaty was not just about maps or thrones. It was a way to restore focus and redirect Portugal's destiny. A moment to turn the kingdom inward and the eyes outward, to rebuild what was broken and prepare for what would come. A strategic pause, a quiet maneuver. In truth, it was only the first draft, because years later a greater line would be drawn. But even here, a phrase began to echo from Lisbon to the edge of the world. Peace on land, freedom at sea. In August of 1481, King Afonso V died. Dom John was crowned in Sintra in a ceremony marked by quiet solemnity. Among his closest allies, he let slip a sharp remark. From my father, I inherited only the roads of the kingdom. Soon after, he summoned the Cortes of Vora, which gathered that November. There, before the kingdom's representatives, he made his vision clear. Noble privilege would no longer rule Portugal. He appointed royal magistrates, restricted feudal abuses, and began restoring the crown's authority. But he knew the real threat wasn't abroad. The nobility watched in silence and whispered. There are times to use the owl's gaze and times to fly like the falcon. He built a web of informants across monasteries, ports, and noble households. until one day it was a letter. The Duke of Braganza had been conspiring with Castile. Dom John ordered his arrest, tried, executed, no spectacle, no delay. 2 assassination plots followed, one dismantled before it began. The Bishop of Évora, a silent threat, was arrested and removed. Then in 1484, Dom Diogo, his cousin and once heir to favor, was summoned to the palace. He was also the brother of Queen Leonor and the king's brother-in-law. And yet he was killed quietly without trial. Some say by the king's own hand. Not even family ties could shield him. Silence followed, and from that silence the crown rose unchallenged. The monarchy, once fragile, now stood unshaken. He governed without needing to prove his power, because no one dared to challenge it. With power consolidated, Dom John II shaped the court to reflect his vision. Practical, strategic, and turned to the sea. He didn't dream of glory. He planned it. He knew the ocean wouldn't be conquered by courage alone, but through science, precision, and vision. In Lisbon, he created the Mathematical Council, a body of scholars, navigators, and cosmographers, tasked with studying the stars, the winds, the tides, and turning the ocean into a map. They were not ordinary men, but minds chosen for a singular mission, to turn knowledge into power and the stars into routes. Among them stood Abraham Zacuto, Jewish astronomer and author of the nautical tables, guiding sailors by sun and stars. Another key figure was José Vizinho, physician and master of the astrolabe, sent to the coast of Guinea. He read the sun at noon, turning sunlight into knowledge and coastline into coordinates. Martim and Rodrigo Behaim, globe makers and cartographers, redefining royal geography. Fernão Dulmo, the bold Azorian, sent west into the unknown. And the king himself, who read every chart, every report, every course with the precision of an engineer. No ship left port without royal instruction, and no captain returned without submitting a full report. Winds, currents, sightings, distances. It became the first true system of nautical intelligence. Under Dom John's command, names became legends, and Portugal became more than a kingdom. It became a plan. He was one of the first to carve Portugal's mark into Africa. In 1482, Diogo Cao reached the Congo River and marked it with stone pillars, stamped with Portugal's royal seal. That same year, following the king's command, on the West African coast, they built the fortress of St. George of the Mine to secure Portugal's growing foothold overseas, a stronghold for gold, ivory, and future expansion. It was also during this time that the slave trade became institutionalized. It is the stain that history could not erase. Time cannot excuse it, but it cannot be omitted. In 1488, Bartolomeu Dias finally rounded the Cape of Storms. The feat was so immense that Dom John II gave it a new name. It shall no longer be the Cape of Storms. From now on, it is the Cape of Good Hope, because he knew from that moment forward, the gateway to the Indian Ocean was open. The route to India was within reach, but he wasn't the first to dare. Years earlier, Gilles had passed Cape Bojador, breaking the myth that beyond it, there was only death. Dom John II gathered all these reports, and with them he reshaped the world. In 1487, a secret land expedition was launched. Its goal, to find eastern trade routes and the mythical kingdom of Prester John. The mission was entrusted to 2 men. One was Pero de Covia, an experienced emissary well-versed in the lands of North Africa. The other, Afonso de Paiva, a younger envoy, bold and discreet. Together they vanished into the east. At the same time, in silence, he ordered missions to the west. Some say Duarte Pacheco Pereira may have sighted the coast of Brazil, long before the year 1500. But with Dom John II, those who know do not speak, and those who speak do not know. In that silence, the future was already being drawn. While other kings looked toward neighboring thrones, Dom John looked to the world. To him, the world was no longer a mystery. It was a calculation, a network, a vision unfolding into a plan, and Portugal was the center of the compass. While the empire expanded and Portugal drew the world anew, tragedy struck the king like a storm at sea. The man who ruled empires could not command fate. In July 1491, his son and heir, Prince Afonso, fell from his horse while galloping along the banks of the Tagus. He died suddenly at just 18. The king fell silent. He shed no tears, spoke no words. Instead, he withdrew into himself, a shadow among maps and silence. But the empire could not wait. Diplomacy called, and once again Dom John took control. Before turning to Castile, Columbus had come to Portugal and made his offer to Dom John II. He proposed reaching the Indies by sailing west. But the king, who had long gathered maps, reports, and suspicions, declined. Not out of disinterest, but because he knew more than Columbus could imagine. He knew that route was uncertain. He knew the path to India lay to the south and east, and he suspected that in the west there was land. On August 3rd, 1492, Columbus sailed under the Catholic monarchs. He believed he had reached the Indies, but found a new continent. Castile celebrated, but Dom John II remained silent. Silent, but not surprised. He had sent ships west years before, silent missions guided by maps no one else had seen. So when news arrived of Castile's discovery, he was not surprised, but he was not silent either. He protested firmly and even considered sending a fleet to defend Portugal's claims. Those waters were no mystery to him, and the king had already done the math. In 1493, Pope Alexander VI issued the Inter Cetera Bull, drawing a line that favored Castile. But Dom John refused to yield. He demanded renegotiation. He pushed firmly strategically, and with diplomacy and calculation, he redrew the map. June 7, 1494, the Treaty of Tordesillas is signed. A line was drawn 370 leagues west of the Cape Verde Islands. Everything to the east would belong to Portugal. Everything to the west to Castile, including a slice of Brazil that Castile didn't yet know existed. Was it coincidence, or was it strategy? Some believe Duarte Pacheco Pereira had already sighted that coast. Some maps attributed to Pero Vaz de Caminha or even to Farragudo hint at prior knowledge. But Dom John never revealed everything. For him, silence was not absence, it was command. With this treaty, the king didn't just protect the route to India. He sealed the fate of an empire. While Castile celebrated what it believed it had discovered, Portugal remained silent, guarding the real secret. What is yours, but what is mine, you haven't even seen. But even as he secured the empire's future on paper, his own future was slipping away. Worn by time and already gravely ill, Dom John began to prepare for what came next. With no legitimate heir, he tried, by all means, to secure the succession. He pleaded with Rome to recognize his bastard son, Dom Jorge de Lancaster. But the Pope refused, and Queen Leonor stood against it. The king, who had controlled destinies across continents, could not control his own lineage. On October 25, 1495, the perfect prince drew his final breath. He was buried in the monastery of Batalha, laid to rest beside his son Afonso, the heir that fate had taken too soon. He was just 40 years old and had ruled for 14. But in those 14 years, he transformed a kingdom into a vision. Before the end, he accepted the inevitable. He let Dom Manuel be named as his successor, not by choice, but by necessity. And then in silence he left. Some say he was poisoned. Others speak of illness, of slow decay. The truth, like so much in his life, remains in shadow. But the legacy did not, because what Dom John II built was not just a reign, but a foundation. He turned Portugal into a compass and gave it a destiny that would echo for centuries. A silent architect of maps of empires of the age to come. He prepared the golden decades that followed. And though his voice faded, his vision never did. When news of his death reached Castile, Queen Isabella the Catholic said only, "The man has died," because even among kings, he was the only one the world truly feared.